Okay, now it's okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
We can start. Yes, we can start, sir. We can start. Yes, sir.
Okay. 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 A very good morning to everyone present on day 2 of Faculty Development Program Industry 4.0 The Way Forward. Myself, Arvind Sangle, Assistant Professor in Department of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering of MCT's Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology. Welcome to all the dignitaries present for today's session. On behalf of MCT's Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology and Department of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering, I welcome today's eminent speaker, Mr. Sagar Gajara sir, Honorable Principal of our institute, Dr. Sanjay Rupade sir, respected HOD and Vice Principal of our Sanjay Deshmukh sir, Vice HOD, Dr. Poonam Sonar ma'am, respected HODs of all the departments, my colleagues, teaching and non-teaching faculty, and all the participants present from various institutes. I welcome you all on the day 2. Sutar sir, Assistant Professor, Department of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering, to brief about today's session and give brief introduction of today's speaker, Mr. Sagar Gajra sir. Over to you, Sutar sir.
Thank you, Arvind sir. Distinguished speaker for today's session, faculty members, students, and dear participants. Good morning to one and all present here. I, Surendra Sutar, Assistant Professor of MCT's Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology, on behalf of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering Department, warmly welcomes you all on second day of 3 days faculty development program on Industry 4.0, the way forward. Yesterday, we had a great session by Dr. Satyanarayana sir on Industry 4.0. We received a very good response from all the participants. We are looking forward same response for today's session as well. Let me brief you about objective of this faculty development program. The first objective is to create awareness about Industry 4.0 among the academia and to build the next generation academic institutions. The second one, to empower the academic diaspora for develop academic courses in accordance with Industry 4.0. Third one, to initiate and to promote innovative framework at academic institution. And fourth one, to enable the research scholar, academic faculties, and industry for state-of-art collaborative research. Now, let me introduce you today's speaker, Mr. Sagar Gajra sir. Sagar sir is a postgraduate in digital and cyber forensic and related laws. He has close to 8 years of experience in cybersecurity and digital forensic. He is currently working with Grant Thornton as a manager in cybersecurity practice. He is responsible for conducting cybersecurity ITIS audit in some of the large companies in India. He has provided training, application, testing, and ethical hacking, and conducted awareness seminars in multiple colleges on cybersecurity. He has conducted forensic investigation in one of the leading news forum website. He has been a part of the team conducting various forensic investigation in association with Navi Mumbai Police. He has also conducted war drive in association with Navi Mumbai Police to identify open Wi-Fi's in Navi Mumbai. He is a certified cybercrime investigator and certified ethical hacker. Currently, he is also assisting Crime Branch Kurla for digital forensic and cybersecurity matters. Recently, he has assisted DCP of Mumbai and provided expert opinion on sensitive case. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and taking time out of your busy schedule. Now I request Sagar sir to take over the session. Sagar sir, over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, I just share my screen. Okay, so can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so very good morning to everyone, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm very grateful for that. Okay, so in today's session, I have basically split the session in two areas. We'll start with what is cybersecurity. I will give you an organization level view. So it is important that you guys are basically the future of cybersecurity for India, right? So whenever you let's say you pass out from your colleges, you go to your jobs, you need to understand how an organization looks at cybersecurity, right? It's not just all theoretical knowledge. It is important to understand some practical implementation level knowledge of cybersecurity as well, right? And so basically, I'll start with some uh, organization level cybersecurity framework, how companies look at cybersecurity in today's world. And in the second half of this session, I'll basically show you guys some details of some technical details about different type of attacks which are there, different type of malwares which are used in a more of a practical level knowledge. And yeah, I'll finish with some guidance in terms of your certifications and future career if you are keen on becoming a cybersecurity expert in future. Okay. Feel free to ask questions in between if you have anything. Don't hesitate. All right. Okay. So yeah, like I said, the contents. We'll start with some fundamentals of cyber. I'll basically show you a framework-based approach. So cybersecurity as a whole concept, understanding it in 2 to 4 hours is close to impossible. But to get an idea how to go about understanding cybersecurity is where the framework will come into the picture, and it will help you understand a systematic approach, how if we start from governance, how we go to different layers, how what are the layers, right? And we hear about cybersecurity. So that is where I'll use a framework to explain that. Then I'll show you what are the different types of attacks, some detailed deep diving into common types of malwares which are used in all of these attacks. I'll run you through some case studies which I've over the period of my career I've helped solve some cases or some investigations which have been in terms of if you are looking for a career in cybersecurity. Who am I? So yeah, so like sir already gave an introduction of me. I have more than 7 years of experience. I'm a postgraduate in digital and cyber forensics. I started my career as an application security tester. Then I worked into digital forensics. I've been part of the team conducting investigations for the law enforcement. I've done IT information security audits, vendor risk assessment, application security testing, social engineering assessments, and a lot more. Yeah. So when we talk about cybersecurity, there is a common misconception that cybersecurity is all about technology, right? So that's not really true. Technology is obviously a massive role part of the cybersecurity, but it's not only it in itself, right? So cybersecurity is basically consisting of three core pillars, that is your people, process, and technology. Now, before I move on to that, before I move on to that, it is also important to understand when we talk about cybersecurity, what exactly are we trying to secure, right? What is cybersecurity? What is the whole idea? What is the core crux, right? So in reality, the crux is nothing but the CIA triad, that is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So what is confidentiality? What is integrity? And what is availability? So let's take an example, right? Uh, let's assume that you have a safe at your home. Let's say if you are keeping something really precious in that safe, maybe let's say money, or so for example, for this example, let's take money. You are keeping some money in your safe. Now when we talk about confidentiality, how will it be applicable there? So who will have access to that safe is where we can look at it at a confidentiality level. For example, if you are only allowing certain set of members in your family, certain set of your friends to actually access that safe, that is where confidentiality comes into the picture. Now applying integrity again for the same level. So let's say if you have kept 1,000 rupees in your safe, Now, for suddenly you realize you had kept 1,000 rupees, but now there are 900 rupees. That means the integrity is, diminished of the safe. So integrity is basically to, as an assurance that the information is trustworthy and accurate. So if you are, for example, if you look at it from a documentation standpoint, so if you have a document which has 4 lines in it, but somehow somebody managed to access the document and change those 4 lines into 3 lines, or edited something inside the document, then the integrity of the document goes away, right? So it is important to protect the integrity as well. So that is integrity. Now availability, right? So it might seem that availability is not that much of an issue, but it is a very important part, right? So let's take the example of safe again. If you are keeping some money in your safe, right, when a situation comes where you need to access that money, but if you are not able to access that money, then it becomes a big problem for you, right? That is where availability comes into the picture. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability, these three, also known as the CIA triad, are basically the core crux of cybersecurity. Everything you hear in cybersecurity, all those attacks, all the data breaches, data protection, privacy, everything is all surrounding, based on the CIA triad itself. So it is important that you are clear what CIA stands for before we actually move on and understand, the other layers of the cybersecurity. So let me give you more information in terms of the people, process, and technology, right? So when we talk about people, right, so there are 2 key aspects to the people element, right? First, everyone in the business or everyone in the organization needs to be aware of their role in preventing and reducing cyber threats. So if you have a technology in place, the people who are managing the technology need to be aware, what they are managing, how they are managing, what all they are configuring, right? So awareness is where that awareness is when people need to be understandable of their role, what they are actually doing in terms of the technology, how they are protecting, right? And security awareness program can basically help reduce the risk of those cyber threats by if a lot of attackers nowadays are targeting people more than technology, right? People who are managing those technology. So that is why the people who are managing the technology need to be fully updated with the latest skills, qualifications, and appropriate awareness to manage those controls. Now, what is process? So basically, process are crucial in defining the organization's activities, roles, and documentation. So process is where we define that let's say if there is a 5 people team who are working on a specific technology, then what are the different roles that those 5 people are going to take upon, right? And also process is where we define that who is going to do what and who is going to do when, right? And also the how. So if I have to basically manage, let's say, a firewall of a company, the process will define that how I'm going to manage the firewall of that particular company, what exactly I'm going to do in the management. That is the process angle of it. And then obviously the technology, technology is obviously crucial when it comes to cybersecurity. By identifying the risk that the organization faces, you can then start looking at what controls you need to put in place, and then how your technology should be configured in a way that it is completely customized as per your business, as per your individual preferences. And then you can deploy it to prevent or reduce the impact of the risk. And depending upon the risk assessment, you can define an acceptable level of risk, right? Again, I'll come to that when we move on to the risk management part. But at a high level, these are the core fundamentals that you should be aware before you are trying to understand anything in cybersecurity. The CIA triad and the 3 core pillars of the cybersecurity: people, process, and technology. So I'm going to take a small pause here. If anybody has any doubts, please feel free to ask, because everything I'm going to say now ahead will going to be based upon these core pillars of the cybersecurity. Okay, so nobody has any doubts.
Sir, we take a question answer session at the end.
Okay.
And if you have any doubt, participant, please put in our chat. Mr. Sagar will going to answer you. Okay. Sir, please go ahead.
Sure. All right. Okay. Just 1 second. I'm just getting up.
I guess Sagar sir has some internet issue. Please be patient and have it stay in a meeting, please.
Sorry. Sorry. I had some. Yep. Okay. So you can see my screen, right? And continue.
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
Awesome. Right. So now, since we, understood the core of cybersecurity, now I'm going to take a sample framework. This is more of a custom framework to, help you understand different layers and how, if you have to understand cybersecurity, what is the best approach in understanding it, right? So as you can see here, let me try. So it starts with business alignment and vision, right? So think of it as you are running a company, and now you need to set up your cybersecurity strategy in place, right? So what is the first thing that you are going to do? You are going to align your cybersecurity plan or your strategy in terms of in alignment with your business vision. So for example, if you are saying that you are going to create a company, or if your company is, let's say, looking to target more of a customer centered company rather than business to business. So think of it like, you are going for a retail company, and your focus is going to be more towards the customers rather than trying to sell your product or services to different businesses. So your vision is basically customer focused, right? So then your cybersecurity strategy should also be more of a customer focused strategy rather than business focused strategy. So when we talk about vision, I'll come to the next step, that is the governance and boardroom and regulatory landscape. Again, these are some certain core factors which are applicable to very large companies, because there you have different boards. You have a board which you have to answer upon, like your CEO, CTO, see if your CXOs basically have to are answerable to the board of the company, right? So the board also has to be in alignment with what you are going to implement in your cybersecurity. And there is a small angle of regulatory landscape that basically comes into the picture. During, if you're, let's say you are running a financial company, right? So then you need to have there are certain regulatory aspects which come into the picture. Like for example, there will be certain guidelines from RBI. There will be certain guidelines. Let's say if you are running a company which is dealing in stock markets, then you have SEBI as a regulator. So there are different regulatory landscapes which you also have to consider when you derive your plan, because these regulators have their own demands or their own requirements, right? So if you say, let's say if you are creating a company which is dealing or interacting with banks, or you are, let's say you are providing loans or something like that, then RBI will have certain set of guidelines which you will have to follow. These are mandatory, right? When you say regulators, like they are, they'll be standing on your head with a danda. If you miss or if you do not follow the guidelines, they'll hit you with a danda of, let's say, ban or penalties or more like that. So whenever you start with your plan of cybersecurity, you have to consider that there will be a regulatory aspect. Always consider that regulatory aspect with it. And also remember, if you'll say that I'm dealing in a small retail store, then there will be no RBI, nothing. Then there is a regulatory body called as CERT-in, Computer Emergency Response Team India. So CERT-in is basically like a regulator which will be applicable for all of the organizations which are basically running in India from a technology standpoint. So always remember that CERT is a more of a guideline providing regulatory. They will not punish you, but they'll give you certain set of guidelines. They'll give you, what you need to do basis upon a different type of businesses. So you need to always consider that as well. Then coming to the different layers, right? So there are three different layers. You have governance layers, you have tactical layers, and your operations layer. So think of it as a top-down approach. So, let's do a small recap. We understood that, you have to first align it with your business vision. What is it that your business you want in your business? What are your goals in your business? What do you want to achieve? And accordingly, you have to align your strategy. And similarly, you have to align it with your board. You have to align it if there is a regulatory requirement, right? Once you have done that, then we break it into three different layers: your governance layer, your tactical layer, and operations layer. These are, these are not any official words or official, terminologies, but it is to help you understand how you need to approach it, right? So we start with governance, we go to tactical, and then there is the operations layer. So in governance layer, we basically derive the cybersecurity governance model, right? Now that is going to include your policy and procedures. I'll come to the security governance slides where there is a description or details about the governance, how, what are policy procedures, what is, different standards and everything. But just for right now, you can, think of it that governance is more like a senior management deciding, how my process is going to be, what are going to be my policies, something like that, right? But at a governance layer, there are certain set of activities, there are certain set of, basic requirements that you need to consider, right? So you start with defining your policy and procedures, align your processes according to the policies. So let's say you have, different business processes. For example, let's take it that you are providing, your company is providing loans, right? So now in that you will have a process where, you are collecting information from customers, in order to verify their qualification, whether they are qualification, or qualification would be not be the right word, whether to validate whether they will be eligible, basis their past history for a new loan. Now when you take the customer information, you are basically asking their personal information, uh, personally identifiable information, PII as we call it. You are basically asking their name, address, contact number, maybe even their documentation such as PAN, Aadhaar, etc., etc. So now that documentation collection is one of your process. That is your business process, right? But when you talk about cybersecurity, you need to understand that if you are collecting any information, it is your responsibility to protect that information. So you need to align your business process with your cybersecurity policy, which you are defining earlier, right? That is what we call as process alignment. Then we have risk management, right? So in terms of the governance, at a high level only, you need to understand that you have 10 business processes, or you have 10 activities which you are doing as part of your organization. Then you need to identify every possible risk which will be, possible, which is applicable for all of your processes. So in risk management, I have some information in the further slide for risk management. But think of it that, before you start, you need to identify that you have 10 different things or 10 different processes, and you need to identify the risk for all of those. And then, your next step would be to basically mitigate those risks. Then we have the legal compliance, roles and responsibilities, architecture, and blueprint. So like I said, governance layer is more of a high level layer, right? You are not actually, implementing anything in the governance layer. You are just deciding, or you are just writing down that, this is what my business is going to be like. This is what my cybersecurity strategy is like. This is what my policy and procedures are like. Coming to the tactical layer is more like, like an implementation level layer, which is more of, will be, think of it like a mid-term plan, right? So whatever you are going to do in the tactical layer will be spread across in the period of, let's say, 3 to 6 months, because these would be long-term initiatives which you have to do to actually, get your policy or get your risks covered or processes aligned, right? These are the actual activities you have to do in the tactical layer. Here I have 3 examples for the understanding, like data protection and privacy, incident response, BCPDR. BCPDR means business continuity program, and DR means disaster recovery, and threat intelligence, right? These, as the, as you can read these words and you can understand, right? These are slightly different from governance, because you are not actually defining anything here. You are actually planning, right? So like I said, you are, for example, you are collecting customer information. That is your process, and if you aligned your cybersecurity policy in terms of protecting the customer data which you are collecting in the process. Now in tactical layer, you are actually going to, figure out that how you are going to protect. So for example, if you are asking the customers to upload their photos of their PAN card, their Aadhaar card, then in data protection and privacy, you will have to figure out the controls as to what you are going to do to protect that information, right? So when we talk about Aadhaar card data or PAN card data, it is also called as PII data, that is personally identifiable information. So in data protection, you will basically have to think, if I'm asking them to upload their file, right, then where will that file be stored? What controls I'm going to have around that, the server which will have these files in there. Uh, Secondary, let's say, what controls will I have in the application, wherein the information of the customers like the name, address, or any PII data is going to be entered. That will all come into the data protection and privacy area. Similarly, in incident response, now you have set up an infrastructure, right? Let's say if you have set up your company, you have 10 different servers, you have different IT components in your infrastructure. What happens when, if any of the infrastructure components, let's say, face a different type of attack, if somebody is trying to attack, if somebody has successfully managed to perform an attack, what will be your incident response, right? This is where in the tactical you plan your incident response in detail. So if say, let's say, if you are feeling that somebody is trying to attack, then that will be a different type of incident, right? If somebody has, you realize that as an attacker has successfully managed to complete an attack, that will be your priority one level, wherein you have to actually respond. You have to figure out what should you do to stop that attack now, what should you do to reduce the impact of that attack, right? Something like that. And similarly, BCPDR. BCP is Business Continuity Program and Disaster Recovery. So in short, what is business continuity? Let's say if one of your server is attacked by an attacker and that server goes down. Now, let's say if your clients or customers, if they are using that server for any kind of service and it goes down, then you need to have business continuity plan to ensure that, if your one server goes down, you need to have another server ready, which can take up that, take up the services or take up the whatever you are providing to your clients and customers. It should be directly transferred to a different server, or else you should have a BCP or a continuity plan in place, which should be basically triggered whenever a server goes down. You need to have 4 or 5 steps defined, that what is it that you are going to do to either take that server back up, or have a different server or a different DR plan in place to ensure that your services or your customers which are using your services should not be impacted. And then we have a threat intelligence. Threat intelligence, I'll go into detail in the further slides, but it is more of collecting every bit of information which can help you identify or help you basically define what type of risk will be applicable for your organization, and then accordingly you can use that intelligence to define controls or put in programs which can reduce the risk for your organization. And then we have the operations layer. This is where the actual testing or the actual cybersecurity activities happen. I have put in just 3 samples here, that is IT and application security, cloud security, and SOC. But there are more activities in the operations layer. The actual network implementation, actual think of it like in governance layer, you decided that in my organization every laptop will have an antivirus. In the tactical layer, you define, okay, my antivirus will be let's say of Trend Micro, and I'm going to, let's say, have 4 or 5 different add-ons which Trend Micro provides in the antivirus. And then in the operations layer, you'll have people who are going into each of the laptops and actually implementing or installing that antivirus, configuring it properly, and looking after that antivirus, right? So that is like an example you can think of for each different layers. Cloud security, it's pretty obvious in itself. Nowadays people are moving their infrastructure to cloud, so it is important to secure the cloud and look at it at a different way, because a traditional infrastructure security will not be applicable to cloud security. There's a cloud works in a different way. Then we have SOC. SOC is basically security operation centers, right? This is where you manage and monitor. You have the logs which are generated from all of your devices, right? Your laptop, your infrastructure devices like your firewall, your routers. Every device will generate a log, right? So those logs will basically go into your SOC center, and that is where you basically set up some kind of monitoring to make sure, this is where you, in your monitoring only, you will be identify if there is a breach, or if somebody is trying to attack. All that type of notifications will come through your SOC. So this is how I'm going to approach it for now. I'm going to break it into 3 different layers. I hope you all understood what are these different layers basically stand for. And I'm going to go slightly deeper into each layer, or at least 1 or 2 topics in each layer, and then we'll go into the different technical level of the attacks. So cybersecurity governance, right? So that is where I thought I mentioned in the earlier slide. In the governance, you defined basically you develop, document, and implement these things. So what are these things, right? You start with policy. So you define, let's take an example of antivirus. So you define in your policy that my every laptop or every endpoint in my organization will have an antivirus. That is your policy. You are giving a statement. So that is where you start with. You start with a statement that every let's say every laptop will have an antivirus. Then you basically define standards or baseline. So what are standards and baseline? Standards and baselines, think of it like like double clicking on the policy. So you are saying that every laptop will have a antivirus. Okay. Now what will be the standard or a baseline? So you will say that every laptop will have an antivirus which is updated which will have its database updated, let's say every 1 day, which will have the if it's not updated in 1 day, basically my laptop will go out of network. So you are basically defining a second level of steps or second level of standards, right? And when I say standards, antivirus example is a very small example, but at an organization level you have different standards like ISO, you have different standards like NIST, right? So you define that my organization is going to follow an ISO standard in your policy. You use the ISO standard as a baseline. Then there is something called as guidelines. So guidelines is not exactly a mandatory step, but when we talk about, let's say for example, an ISO 27001. So you define that your policy that everything will follow ISO 27001. You are using that as a standard in your organization now. So your guidelines will basically align your organization level infrastructure to the standards or baseline. You are basically in guidelines, you'll be describing how you are going to basically follow that standard. That is your guidelines. And then you have procedures. Procedures will be like a detailed step by step I would say instructions or manual to follow that policy and implement it in your organization. So think of it like this triangle, right? You start with policy. Policy will be very high level statement. There won't be much details in the policy, but as you go down in the pyramid, you will see more and things getting more and more detailed, right? So your standards will have some details, guidelines will have slightly more, and your procedure will be the final document which will have each and every single detail about your implementation, and that will be aligned with your policy. And always remember, policy and procedure are the two weapons against which you can basically hold your infrastructure, right? If you have not defined a policy and procedure, you cannot really follow anything. These are your basically, you are defining the way forward, or you are defining the cybersecurity approach in your company. I have a question: how company deals with data leakage? Okay, I'll come to that in the later part of the session. Okay. Right. Then we have the next in governance is basically risk management, right? So we hear about a lot of this, different type of risk. What is a risk, cybersecurity risk, and all of that. So it is important to understand how an organization looks at it. So if you have a company and you need to identify all the risks, what are you going to do? So there is a concept called as risk management, and there is a complete life cycle in place, which is like a standard which most of the organizations today are following. What are you going to do? That you're going to start with identification, right? So basically what you are going to do, you write out all the different threats and risks you can think of and ask for one from the other stakeholders. So if you are running an organization, you need to perform a risk management. What are you going to do? So you'll start with writing down all the possible risks you can think of which can impact your business. So let's take a step back to the same example. Let's say you are running organization which is providing loans. So you have a process which is taking customer information. So what risks can you think of in that process? Uh, Customer data can be leaked. Somebody can hack into your application and uh, basically view all the particular customer information. They can download or exfilter it the customer documents which are being uploaded in that. Somebody can basically perform a DOS attack or basically block your servers from being accessed for your own employees, something like that. So that is some samples which I can give you. But when we talk about identification, you have to think thoroughly and every possible risk, right? You'll even have to consider that somebody will come or somebody might even attack your employee and take away their laptop itself. That is also a risk. The physical laptop can be stolen. That is also a risk, right? When we talk about risk, everything has to be considered, not only your digital or cyber related risk, even your physical risk has to be considered, because that will then give an attacker an entry point into your network or an entry point into your infrastructure. The next step is to assess, right? When you talk about assessment, you have to evaluate each risk by the likelihood. So like I said, what is the likelihood that your application which is taking the customer data can be hacked? So how you define the likelihood? You have to think again a step down. Okay, my organization has the application over the internet, right? So that means that there is a high chance that people might be able to attack that application. If it's not over the internet, there is something called as intranet. It is meaning inside the company's internal network only. Then the likelihood of any attacker trying to attack that particular application is slightly reduced, because they don't know how do you open that application or where is that application. If it's over the internet, then anybody can access that application, right? That means that increases the likelihood of that particular attack. And then accordingly you have to define the impact. Like I said, what is it that your application is doing? It is, let's say, in our example, it is collecting customer information. That means if that information is leaked, then the impact will be very high on your organization, right? We are talking about customer personal information. If you are collecting the personal information and that is leaked, then that is going to have very high impact. Similarly, if your application is, let's say, employee attendance application, it is like only used by your employees to mark their attendance, meaning it does not have any confidential or let's say any customer information. So if an attacker, let's say, manages to attack that application, and let's say if they manage to I would say access the data of that application, then what is it that they're going to get? They'll get the attendance information of their employees. The overall impact of that is very less compared to the impact of losing the customer information. That is where you assess that what is the likelihood of the attack, how is it going to impact. And then the next step is to mitigate. Now you have identified what risks are, you have identified how bigger those risks are for you. So you need to now implement a process to basically reduce those impact of the attacks and reduce the impacts of each risk being realized, and you need to have a response plan in place to protect or reduce that risk. So again, coming back to our example, what is it that you are going to do if your application is an internet facing application and it has customer information? So in terms of mitigation, let's say you'll have two-factor authentication login on that application, right? So for example, if your employee has to log in the application, he has to use his username, password, and there will be an OTP. So you are basically implementing something which will reduce, you are basically trying to mitigate the risk of an attacker trying to attack your application which is over the internet, right? Similarly for monitoring, so if you have, let's say, if you have implemented a control to mitigate the risk, now what is it that you are going to do to check on a continuous basis that your risk is being monitored, right? So let's say if you implemented a two-factor, how you are going to check if somebody is trying to bypass that two-factor? Then that comes in your monitoring aspect, right? You are checking if somebody is trying to bypass your controls or bypass your mitigating plan which you have put in place. That is where the monitoring comes into the picture. And then there you have reporting. So and when we talk about organization, reporting is very important, right? So assuming that if you are responsible for a company's cybersecurity, you have to report every bit of information to your top management. That is like a very important aspect. Okay. Now coming to the aspects in the tactical, right? So basically, I've covered this, mostly in the earlier discussion: data protection and privacy, business continuity, incident management, and threat intel. These are just sample four, elements which are in the tactical here. In the data protection and privacy, like I said, if you are just taking the customer information, then it is your responsibility solely to protect that customer information. Then, business continuity, you have to identify, your core organizational processes. Just give me let me give you an example of floods, right? So everybody is aware there was a flooding incident in Mumbai a few years back. So what happened that during that time, the organizations, let's say, they had their data centers in place, but the people were not able to come to the offices because they were flooded. So if you are running a company, your IT infrastructure is up, but your people are not able to reach your office, then your business won't be able to continue, right? You need somebody, you need your employees, you need your people to come into your office to work on the infrastructure, and that is how you'll provide your services to the company. So when we talk about business continuity, it is not only limited to technology. You have to also consider the people aspect of it. Again, now we all are aware, due to COVID, we have another challenge the organizations are facing today due to COVID. But then again, the good business continuity plans are helping them address it, right? Like now, people have started to work from home. How they are able to work from home? They have certain application softwares which are allowing them, like VPN, which through which basically they can access the company infrastructure or company network through their home. So all of that comes under business continuity, right? What is remote or what is work from home basically doing for them? It is enabling them to continue their business operations through their home itself, right? That is an example of best example of business continuity. Then you have incident management. Like I said before, if you are being attacked, if any cyber incident is happening, cybersecurity related incidents happening in your company, what is it that you are going to do? So you, as an incident management plan, you need to have a set of instructions to, which basically tell you how to respond, right? Like somebody asks a question, what is it that you are going to do in a data breach? Data breach is classified as an incident. What is exactly happening in that incident? So somebody has, let's say, managed to attack your application which is hosting some information, and they are able to take that data out of their application. uh, that is basically you call as a data breach. Now, as an organization, what is it that you have to do? So if you first is something you have to identify, that you need to be aware that this particular attack is happening, right? How is it that you'll be aware? So you'll have a monitoring controls in place, you'll have your SOC in place to tell you that somebody is trying to, somebody is reaching your data. And then the next step would be how you are going to stop it. So in that case, that is only applicable if you are able to catch the activity in progress, or if not, then the data is already gone, and the if an attacker has already managed to take away the data, then there is nothing you can do to stop him, right? The next step would be to basically identify what data is gone. Then you have to actually conduct an investigation to identify how the data breach happened, what was that the attacker managed to break into, how did he manage to break into, right? And then that is how you understand what is going to be impact of the data which is leaked. And then you have to inform the, if it's a customer data, you have to inform the customer. If it's a customer PI data, you need to inform like regulatory bodies like CERT or RBI, depending upon whatever is applicable in your case, right? So that is where the incident management comes into picture. Then you have the threat intelligence. Like I said, I'll go into the detail in the next slide for the threat intelligence. So what is threat intelligence, right? So every bit of information which is available on the internet today is basically taken as a threat intel, because this information will be used by your external threats of your company. So what is that information, right? So here are some sample. So indicators of compromise. Now, I'm not sure what you have heard about something called as IAC. IAC is basically indicators of compromise. So if you have your organization, and if you are, if you have, let's say, 10 servers, what is it that you see in that server and you realize, oh shit, my server has been hacked? These are basically called as indicators of compromise. These can be anything, right? This can be like a simple, a log which says that your data is successfully copied, something like that. So that basically comes into the IC. When we talk about threat intel, indicators of compromise are basically the best possible threat intel you can get today. Because if you see, let's say, if you have an organization Now you need to basically configure all IOCs in your company to make sure that if anybody is trying to breach into your infrastructure, you get that information or you are notified for it at the start itself, not after the incident has happened, right? As an individual also, you want basically to know if somebody is trying to attack at the starting itself, because then only you can actually stop it and reduce the impact. That is why IOCs are very critical when we talk about threat intelligence. Apart from IOCs, there are different, like your social media information. You have deep web, dark web information where data is being sold by black hat hackers. So you need to understand that what data is there they are trying to sell. Is there any data related to your company? That is why that is intelligence for you, right? If it's related to your company, meaning something has already happened and your data is already gone. Then other than that, there are different malware analysis, like uh, uh, IOCs or for different type of malware. I'll come to that. We have a separate section for malwares. Then we have messaging platforms for criminals and cyber activists, like where people might have heard activist group or like anonymous. So there are different groups of black hat hackers or cyber criminals which basically communicate to each other through different forums and portals, right? So if you are a cybersecurity professional, then what is it that you are going to find in these forums, right? So you will basically find out what are they talking about, what are their next attacks, what are the attack vectors, because see, at the end of the day, all the cyber criminals are people like you and me, right? They know some things but they don't know everything. So that is where they also try to communicate through forums and share information to each other. If somebody is facing a challenge, that attacker will put in that forum, okay, I'm not able to get past this firewall, or I'm not able to get past this antivirus. Then other attackers will come and give him tips like, try this thing, try such different techniques, and then they might basically share information, right? So from a security expert point of view, that sharing of information is also a intelligence for you, right? What are they talking about, which avas they are not able to bypass. If somebody gives them a tips which through which they are able to bypass that antivirus, what is that tip? And from an expert point of view, how you are going to protect your organization against that particular attack as well, right? That is a different example. Then you have different code repositories which are available on the internet. Paste sites. There is something called as paste bin, right? A lot of attackers and activists basically use paste bin to release some information or knowledge, right? So all of this, these are some sample information, but every bit of data, no matter where it is coming from, it is going to be very important. Uh, there's a small video I would like to show, but I'm not sure if I can show it. Okay, I'll keep it paused for now. Maybe after all these slides, I will come back to this. Right. So now we talked about governance. We talked about tactical. Now we basically understand something about application security. 1 second. Yeah. Now we are able to screen my screen properly, right? I think there was some issue there. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So in terms of the operations layer, right? The first thing which I'm going to cover is application security. So this is like a very, I would say, the most important concept when it comes to cybersecurity. We might hear everybody talking about hacking. We might hear everybody talking about data breaches and everything. But what is it in reality they are doing? It is nothing but they are actually trying to bypass the application level security controls, right? So before I start, in detail about application security, you need to understand that nowadays most of the operations, I would say 99% of the business operations today run on application. We are using Zoom today. Zoom is an application. You use into, let's say, if you have a college portal which you log in, that is an application, right? Anything and everything we use today is an application. It might be a different type of application. Some applications are web-based applications. Some applications are desktop-based applications. We call them thick client applications. Or you also have something called as APIs, which are also nothing but applications. So everything today is surrounding upon applications itself. So that is why application security is very important. When we talk about hackers, ethical hackers, everything, what are they? Basically, they are application security experts, nothing else, right? So now we come into the application security. We need to understand what are the types of application security testing. So here you are seeing dynamic application security testing, static application security testing, and interactive application. So think of it that dynamic is basically the testing which is done 80% in the application security testing. What is dynamic testing? So let's say if I have to test an application, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start open that application, and then I'm going to start directly running my test. And now dynamic application security testing is applicable mostly on the web related applications, because if you are, let's say, using a browser to access that application, so when you connect to that application, that is where you can directly start the dynamic testing. So you can see what inputs an application is taking. Accordingly, you can basically try to put something in that input. Let's say if application is asking you to put your name, you'll have to type your name, right? So in dynamic dash testing, I'll basically type my name, and I'll also type in some different characters to see how that application is responding to my input. In static application, we'll basically, every application is basically built on a code, right? You guys would be aware that there is a code for everything. You are learning that code now in your college, but from a security point of view, that code also has to be looked upon, and that is done in the static application. So basically, we look at it from the code, we read the code, we understand, okay, here the application is taking some input, but it is not filtering, it is not cleaning that input, right? It is directly taking it to processing. That is covered into static application test. We have the interactive application testing. Interactive application is nothing like more of a thick client. So if you have a VB code or an application in your desktop, it will have to be double clicked upon to basically open the application, right? Instead of comparing to a web application where you just have to put the URL. In interactive, if you open an application, you have to understand how that application is behaving in a particular I would say sandboxed environment, rather than in a web application where you are directly accessing it through the web application. Now, let me tell you about the methodology. So how usually we approach when we talk about application testing. We start with information gathering. So we understand, it is very important to understand the logic of the application, right? What is the application purpose of that application? Let me take an example which we were talking about earlier, like a loan providing company. They are taking the customer information. Now if you see what is the logic behind that application, you need to collect some certain set of information, and then that information will be processed at the back end to basically identify if whether a customer is eligible for a loan or not. So from an information gathering perspective, let's say if you are a security tester or if you are an attacker and you have to attack that application, you all have to understand what that application is doing, right? So that is coming under information gathering. And from the technical aspects, you need to understand what technology that application is using, what is the front end, what is the back end. So let's say if it's a PHP or uh, uh, VB application, depending upon what application we are looking for. So PHP would be like a server side, then you'll have a database there, right? You have to identify which database is there, right? That all thing is done in the information gathering phase, wherein you are not actually doing any testing. Your whole purpose of information gathering is to identify as much as information as possible in that, right? And once you are able to collect that information, your next step is to plan analysis, right? So now let's say if you have identified that application is a PHP application, it has a MySQL database, it is running on a Windows 2008 server. So you have the information, right? Now you have to basically plan what are you going to do. So identified that it's a PHP application, so you have to basically prepare your test cases or prepare your attack vectors for PHP application. So that will help you focus, right? You need not try Java attacks on this application because you know that it's a PHP application. And analysis, right? Planning and analysis. So now we also understood that it's a PHP MySQL application. So what will be your analysis? You are going to gather your use cases for specific to PHP applications, And then you are basically going to try those use cases and analyze the application response. Now, basis that response, you will be able to identify whether it's vulnerable to that particular attack or yes or no, right? And the next step would be penetration testing. So VA and PT basically work hand in hand. You identify a vulnerability and then you test whether you are able to successfully penetrate to that one through that vulnerability. That is what we do in penetration testing. And the final aspect is reporting. Whatever you have identified in your testing phase, you have to report it so that those vulnerabilities can then be patched, right? Again, I'd like to clarify, everything I'm giving, telling here is more of a security testing point of view and not from an attacking point of view, from an hacker's point of view. But understand that even if we are looking at an hacker's point of view, they will also follow this same methodology up to reporting, right? Obviously, they are not going to report you, okay, bhai, maine those to you. They'll use it for their own intention, malicious intention. But they will also do information gathering. They will also plan and analyze. They will identify vulnerabilities and they will try to penetrate to those vulnerabilities. Uh, when we talk about testing, you don't understand there are good industry standards today which are available, which you can use as a baseline. There is something called as OWSP, where there is something called and some organization called as SANS, right? And OS basically have decided through years and through different security researchers, they have basically listed down top 10 vulnerabilities which you should always consider if you are testing in an application. And what do you mean? What do they mean by top 10? Meaning that the impact, if those vulnerabilities are successfully attacked, the impact is going to be very high. So no matter what you need to always at minimum test for those top 10 vulnerabilities, right? So yeah, so there are industry standards which you can refer to if you are actually performing the testing. These are there are different types of testing you need to consider, and the methodology. Methodology is very important because this is how you have to approach any kind of testing in order to make sure you are able to find the most vulnerabilities in the application, and accordingly you can report them to make sure they get patched. Uh, some information about VA and PT. These are the a lot of terms which are heard in terms of cybersecurity. So a vulnerability assessment is more of a rapid automated review of devices, the network devices, servers, systems, to identify key vulnerabilities in that. And think of it that vulnerability assessment is like if you have a door in front of you, you have to basically try to go through that door. In vulnerability assessment, you are going to try knocking that door, you are going to try directly open the lock of that door, you are going to try to push that door. That is where you're just going to identify basically points which are vulnerable in the setup, right? Now this could be anything. You are trying to identify vulnerabilities in your application, you are going to try and identify vulnerabilities in your servers, in your network devices, in your systems, anything in your infrastructure. Vulnerability assessment is not limited to any particular type of infrastructure, right? Now come to what is it that you do in vulnerability assessment, right? So in terms of organization level, you again start with information gathering. One thing I would like to highlight, always remember information gathering is very, very important in any kind of security assessment. You need to identify what is it that you are trying to attack. You need to understand what is the setup, what are the system types which you are trying to attack, because then only then you will be able to basically filter out your attack types, and then you'll be able to perform a focused attack on that particular based on the information you are gathering. Remember, your actual attack won't take time. It is a matter of few minutes, but your information gathering might take days. That's why always make sure you focus very well on your information gathering process. Now coming to the VA and PT understanding. So like I said, think of vulnerability assessment as you have a door in front of you and you have to get through that door. But in vulnerability assessment, you won't actually go through that door, right? You'll just see that door. You are going to try to identify if the lock is open. You'll try to push that door if it can directly be opened. You can see if there are any holes in that particular door, through which you can open. But you are not actually going to open that door. In penetration testing, you are actually going through that door, right? Think of it that in vulnerability assessment, you identified a few weak points in that door. Now in penetration testing, you are actually going to try to exploit that weak points and try to open that door, right? uh, uh, think of it that in penetration testing, you'll basically call daya darwaza tod do. That will come into the picture in penetration testing and not vulnerability assessment, because in penetration testing you actually try to go through it, right? Now apply that logic in the actual testing. So you'll gather information in the vulnerability assessment, you'll perform scanning. So there are very good scanners available today in the market to actually, need not do it manually, but you have to perform a scan which will help you, give you a report. Basis that report, you can actually do some manual filtration and throw out the false positive, identify if your scanning output says there are 10 issues. If you do a manual filtration, in reality there will be only one issue, but that scanning will help you, to focus only on the 10 issues, right? So you'll perform scanning and manual testing, you'll discover and assess vulnerabilities. So if you identify that there is if a let's say if a server, Windows 2008 server is vulnerable to remote code attack, so you'll then assess that vulnerability, you'll try to document as much as information about it, right? Now that is where your vulnerability assessment will end. If you have to actually do a penetration testing, then you have identified a vulnerability, you will actually gather or prepare the exploits which you'll have to use, right? And basis that, you'll actually try to exploit it. You will actually perform the attack which will try to get you through the security directly into that particular server. And basis that, you'll get a reporting, you'll get a report, and then you put in the recommendation. Because like I said, all of this information is from an organization standpoint, because the organization need to understand what are the vulnerabilities they need to patch. You are a security analyst or you are a security tester, you are not an attacker or a hacker. If you are an attacker or a hacker, you will just stop at the exploitation part and basically do whatever you wish to do from here, and you would not report or recommend. So that is vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. uh, some understanding about security operations center. You earlier you saw there was something called as SOC. So SOC is basically nothing. It is like a remote center for security operations to monitor, detect, and respond to cybersecurity attacks and incidents. So like I said, if you have an infrastructure, you have servers, you have network devices, you have routers, you have your endpoints, you have your laptops, you have your desktops. Now, what is, how are you going to monitor if they are being attacked, or how are you going to monitor if somebody is trying to, leak the data through those devices, right? That will basically happen through a SOC. SOC is nothing but a center. So if you refer to the picture, you'll have 4 or 5 desktops, you'll have a dashboard, which will basically, sorry, tell you, in terms of your infrastructure, where you are at. It will give you a real-time dashboard if somebody is trying to attack on your network, attack on your laptops or your endpoints. And that is where it comes, you monitor your infrastructure, right? Then the next step is detect. If you are monitoring your infrastructure and you realize that somebody is trying to attack, a different type of attack on your network, on your infrastructure, that attacks can be detected via a SOC. And then the next step is to respond to those attacks. So if you are able to identify if somebody is trying to attack into your monitoring, and you detected what type of attack is that, and accordingly you can derive what will be your next step and how are you going to respond to that particular attack. So nowadays every organization has a SOC center. I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, SOC has become very streamlined, and people have realized that it is impossible if you have an bigger organization. You have employees, let's say thousands of employees. How are you going to monitor each and every employee from a cyber security standpoint? So you'll have to set up a cyber SOC in place, through which you can basically monitor all your digital infrastructure. Right. Now understanding attack vectors, right? So now we are basically going to do a deep dive. Let me do a time check. Okay, so we have some time. So now this is where I'm going to go slightly detailed into different attack vectors. So what are the common attacks, which we are basically seeing every day? We are seeing different type of malwares which are released. We are hearing about phishing attacks, password attacks, DDoS attacks. DDoS are distributed denial of service. For example, if you have a server and your customers are basically accessing that server, so somebody can perform a DDoS attack and basically, deny you from accessing that server. So think of it that it is impacting your availability point of view, right? So like we mentioned, CIA triad, it will take, CIA confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are a core crux. So DDoS is an attack which impacts the availability. Rest all of the attacks will basically impact your confidentiality and integrity. Then we have man in the middle attack. So if you are using Wi-Fi, if you are using a public Wi-Fi, then there is a high chance somebody can perform a man in the middle attack and basically, see whatever you are trying to do in the internet. Take a look at your personal information. They might even be able to grab your passwords or your sessions. Then we have the drive-by download. This is a relatively new type of attack. So think of it like if I give you an URL, if I give you, hey, check out this website. It is giving you free tokens or free something something. If you open that website, it will automatically download a file in your laptop. You did not click on a download button. You are not trying to download anything, but because the attack type is such that even by opening a single website, it will automatically download a file in your laptop and it will execute that file. So from a security standpoint, it is very, I would say it has a high impact because you have very less control on it. You are not clicking on it, but it is still getting downloaded, it's still getting executed in your laptop. Then we have something called as malvertising. Malvertising is nothing but advertising mixed with malware. We have different ads, pop-ups which come up. Like if you go to a website, there are 10, 20, 30 different type of advertisements which pop up. So what the nowadays attackers are trying to do is that pushing those advertisements through malware. Then we have rogue software. What is rogue software? Rogue software is nothing but a software which is not performing the actions which it is intended to do. So if you are installing a software, let's say free video converter, you want to convert a video or you want to uh, edit an image, right? So if you download a software which is supposed to be an image editor, but once you download it and once you install it, instead of actually giving you an application to edit that image, it will actually start utilizing your computing, or it will actually start installing other applications in your computer. Then that is basically a rogue software which is not doing what it is supposed to do. Other than these, there are different other attacks like ransomware. Ransomware basically comes under malware. Then we have cryptojacking, which is a new trend which has recently come up, right? So what is happening in cryptojacking? Cryptojacking is basically a trend that involves cyber criminals hijacking a third party home or work computers to mine for cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin requires computing power. It requires immense amount of computing, immense amount of power, processing power, right? So that processing power, hackers basically try to make money for themselves by using your processing power or your laptop or your work computer, through which they are basically mining cryptocurrencies for themselves. Okay. Then we have something called as state sponsored attacks, right? So this is these are a few attacks which are not mentioned on the slide, but I feel that you should also be aware of it. When we talk about state sponsored attacks, you might have heard in news, right? There are certain North Korean hackers which are basically attacking US companies, or even they have even tried to attack some Indian companies. They've even tried to attack some Indian power plants basically. So what are these state sponsored attacks? They are basically unofficially sponsored cyber criminals by a country. So there are, and in reality today, there are a lot of state-sponsored attacks happening. You understand that there are, some type of cold wars happening across different type of countries, right? For example, India, China, US, Russia, right? They are not actually gone, on a war or fighting each other through guns, but they are actually fighting each other in the digital world through state-sponsored attacks. Right. So these are just some common attack types which you should be aware of. Uh, I'm going to show you a sample illustration. Uh, you know, so when we talk about phishing attack, there is a concept called spear phishing attack. What is spear phishing, and how is it different from phishing? So spear phishing is nothing but let's say if I have to perform a phishing attack for a company which has 1,000 employees, I'm going to send an email, malicious email, to all 1,000 of employees. That is phishing attack. What is a spear phishing attack? Spear phishing attack is I'm actually focusing my attack on certain set of people who are I identified who are those people, what are their likes, and what are their interests, and accordingly my attack I've customized it for them, right? So I'm going to show you a sample illustration how an attacker would actually perform a spear phishing attack. So let us start it with a genuine user of a company who is basically log in to perform their daily activities. Okay, yeah. So how that basically looks like. So if I'm a user of a company, I will go to my webmail. I will start. I will go to my. I will enter my username, my password. I will open my email. I will check what emails I have, and accordingly, I will decide. What work I have to do during the day. Right. This is how it looks like. I go to the browser. I put in the login credentials, and then I log into my web. This is nothing malicious. It's a simple process of how an employee basically logs into the company. So now as an attacker, what is it that I'm going to do? So basically, I'll set up my website, or I'll set up a phishing website and a phishing email which will be sent to that particular user. So, I'll go to, let's say, a GoDaddy, I'll purchase a domain which is like a similar but a spelling error, right? If you notice, it's my company, not my company. I purchase, look for a domain which is similar to the domain of the employee. I'll purchase that domain. I'll set up my website, which will basically look exactly like the website the employee is using. I will, upload some code and basically set up a hosting for that website. I'll set up a database. If I have to capture the username and password, and then I'll be draft an email wherein I'll put it the link of my website, right? This won't be the actual website the employees used to log in. This will be the phishing site which, as an attacker, I have set up. I will draft an email. In this case, the email will basically say that we have detected multiple failed logins from your official email. And I'll put the location, let's say UK, because if you are an user, you are getting an email which is saying that somebody is trying to log in your account, and they have actually successfully logged in. And if it was you, you can ignore. But if it was not you, then you should click on this link and change your password. So it sounds pretty convincing if you are a user or you're an employee of that company. So once I, as an attacker, I've set up it, I've sent an email to that particular employee. So the mail will be received by that particular employee, right? Specially crafted email which I've just now sent. And as you saw that the URL or the phishing link which was there in the email, which was not in plain text, right? It was hyperlinked. So as an employee, if I'm logging into my desktop like an everyday activity, I open my email, I see, okay, I got an email from IT help desk. Okay, it's saying me there are multiple failed attempts. I need to click on that link. And when I click on that link, it will open a website where I have to change my password. So I'm going to put my old password, my new password. If you look carefully, the URL, the domain is the different, or it's a phishing one, which I have set up as an attacker, right? The employee is not going to look at that because the website which he's used to seeing every day is what he's seeing now. There is nothing different or new there. So what he'll do is he'll say, okay, there are daily website hai, okay, old password dalo, new password dalo, right? It's saying me successfully change password. it will take up to 4 hours. Okay, so the employee, what will the employee do? He'll wait for 4 hours for the new password to come into the effect. But in reality, what is it that has happened is that an attacker has successfully phished that particular employee. So when he entered his old password, that old password got captured in a database, right? So the hosting which the attacker set up is where you can see now. I'll show you how that password is captured in the database. So I'll go to the database. I'll see. Okay, see my old employee's old password is here. His new password is there. From an attacker's point of view, this new password does not mean anything. But the old password is where I just successfully managed to fish that particular employee, and I got his username and password. So this is how a simple phishing attack happens. As complicated as it might sound, it's not really that complicated from an attacker standpoint. Okay. So that was an illustration to help you understand how a phishing attack takes place. Now let me give you some insights of different type of malwares. So always remember, phishing attack is like a method to reach to a employee or basically push through your attack. In real world scenarios, there are different type of attacks. The one which we saw earlier was like a user credentials attack, where the idea is to get the username and password. But there are certain attacks in which I will send you an email. That email will contain a malware. Now that malware can be of different types. The idea or the intention behind that phishing attack is to actually either get the credential or breach into the company network, right? You have each company as an organization will have different controls. They'll have IPS, IDS. IPS is intrusion prevention system. They'll have IDS intrusion detection system. They'll have firewalls. They'll have antivirus. They'll have anti-malware solutions. Whatever solutions the companies implemented, they have spent lakhs and lakhs of rupees. But from an attacker standpoint of view, what I have to do is I have to use any of a single malware from these. I have to put it in an email, and I have to shoot that email to the employee. All I have to do is ensure that email reaches to that employee's inbox, and they click on that either that link, or there'll be an attachment which will actually be a malware. So now let me talk about different types of malwares, right? So these are more of a recent malwares which are actually circulating in today's world. Everybody is aware here of ransomware. What it does is it disables your access to the data until the ransom is paid. Real world example, there is a ransomware called RYUK, but if I have to give you a best example, that would be WannaCry, because most of, I would believe, people here have heard about WannaCry in the last few years. Then there is a new malware type which is fileless malware. Make changes to the files that are native to the operating system. I'll come to the detail in that, but this is like fileless malware is like one of the very I would say latest and bigger threats, in our bigger challenges in today's cybersecurity world, right? Because there is no file which is downloaded, there is no file which you can see and try to delete it. It's completely fileless. Then we have spywares, which basically collect your activity data without your knowledge. Example would be a dark hotel spyware, which basically tries to enter your let's say if it's in your in your desktop or in your laptop, what it will do is it won't stop you from anything. It will just run in the background, capture whatever activity you are doing, and then later on pass on that to the attacker. Then we have adwares, right? Serves unwanted advertisements. I'm sure everybody is aware of this and really annoyed by this, but it is what it is, right? Ads pay money to the attackers, so they try to push as much as advertisements as possible through you. That could be through official way, wherein if you visit a website, there will be advertisement block on this right corner, or through adwares where you don't have basically any control, and they'll just keep pushing advertisements, more and more advertisements through you. Then we have Trojans. Trojans are basically when they disguise itself as a desirable code, but in reality, they basically get executed, and they do what the attacker wants them to do. So think of it like if you are downloading a software, like I give an example of say video converter, video editor, image editor. Like nowadays, these are a lot of
very trending application. So if you download an application which is supposed to be a video editor and you install it in your machine, it will show you a page, or it will open the application where you can edit the videos. But in reality, there is a separate set of code which will get executed in the background, and through which either your data could be transferred to the attacker, or they can basically install other applications in your software. So a Trojan is something which basically disguises itself as a desirable code, or a code or application which you want, which you are deciding, but in reality there will be a different code which will execute it in the background. Then we have worms. The what it does is basically spreads through a network by replicating itself. Worms do not hack. Worms are not a type of malware which is used to hack in your network, inside your network. But instead, the idea is that if I release a worm in the network, it will continue to replicate itself till a point where it will utilize all your computing power of your laptop. It will utilize the computing power of your servers. It will choke your network, because it's continuously replicating itself. It's not actually damaging anything, but because of its replications, non-stop replication, it will consume your computing power, right? And what happens when your power is consumed? Your it will impact your availability aspects. Your network will get jammed. People won't be able to work. They won't be able to access their applications and so on. Then we have rootkits. Rootkits give hacker remote control of a victim's device. Rootkits are slightly different from Trojans, because Trojans are basically a attack type or attack vectors which run on the operating system, right? But rootkits are something which gets executed and they sit above your operating system, right? I believe many of you here are aware of something called as BIOS. Every operating system, you have, that it has a BIOS. BIOS gets loaded first, and then your operating system gets loaded, right? So rootkits basically, if my computer is impacted by a rootkit, it will be sitting, or it will be installed anywhere between my BIOS and my operating system. So this is where the rootkit will actually sit there. If you are impacted by rootkit, it is very, very difficult to identify that it's you are actually infected by a rootkit, because your operating system, your antivirus, or your controls will be in the operating system, and your operating system will never be able to detect a rootkit. There are other methods or ways to identify if you are infected by a rootkit, but they are very challenging to identify from an operating system standpoint. Then we have keyloggers. They basically capture your keystrokes. The idea is that if you are using logging into an application, the keylogger will just capture your keystroke. Your keystrokes will meaning everything and anything you type on your system. Then we have bots. Bots are more of a zombies, launches a broad flood of attacks. So if I am able to successfully attack your computer, I will create your computer into a bot, and then I will, let's say I might create a army of different bots, right? If I am able to break into 100 computers, I'm going to create all of them as a bot, and then use those 100 computers to actually attack on a different computer, right? So they'll act as my bots, or also known as zombies. Mobile malware. So everything we talked about here, all of these malwares can also be used for attacking mobiles, but there are certain set of malwares which are specific to mobile devices, like Android system or an iOS system, right? So these are different type of malwares which are very, I would say, active in today's world. So ransomware, like I mentioned, everybody might have seen this in WannaCry. The idea behind ransomware is to basically stop you from accessing your data, stop you from accessing your system. And if you have to access it, then you need to basically, make a payment. Right. So there are different types of ransomwares in itself, right? The idea behind is to basically hold you at ransom for your own data, for your own, machine. Some information about the evolution of ransomware. It is not something which has just came up in the last few years. Ransomware attacks or ransomware malwares have been in the cybersecurity world for a long time now. They have evolved, basically. Think of it that way. That first malwares were, there was a first malware ransomware was Revetin screen locking, which we saw in the earlier slide, like this one, right? This is a screen locker. It will lock your screen, and it will only give you these two options, wherein you have to either make a payment and check your payment status, and the basis that you will get a decryption key from the attacker, and then use that key to decrypt and access your data. So ransomware has been in the cybersecurity world for quite some time now. It has evolved very, I would say, very ingeniously throughout the years, and there are more and more ransomware variants are coming every day, right? And when I talk about different variants, right? So what is it that is making them different? So the core concept of ransomware is same for all of these variants and strains, but they have they are actually using different vulnerabilities to exploit, right? So WannaCry was the one which was very famous ransomware. uh, why was WannaCry so famous, or why was WannaCry so successful? Is because it was exploiting a Windows SNB vulnerability in the Windows SNB protocol. That vulnerability has been in the Windows system for a lot of years, right? And I believe because of the recent NSA data leak or NSA hacks, that vulnerability came into public, and then it was used by the attackers. Similarly, there are different types of ransomware, like we have Locky, we have Serper, we have Petya, not Petya, we have Clop. These are ransomware which basically use different vulnerabilities, but the end game or the end goal for all of these is same, right? They will lock your system, lock you out of it, and they'll ask you to make basically certain payment, and only then you'll be able to access your data or your systems. Case study. So I'm pretty sure you guys would be reading news every day, right? Every day you hear that some or the other organization is impacted or attacked or facing a ransomware attack, right? So this is one where we heard a company called as India Bulls, was impacted by a Clop ransomware. So different variants are used for different type of attacks, right? And in this particular scenario, the hackers actually threatened the organization that if you would not pay us, we are going to leak your information. So it was a combination of two attacks, right? They actually managed to data breach out the data from the organization, and then they put in a ransomware which locked the organization out of their own data. Fileless malware, like I mentioned earlier, it uses a legitimate program to infect a computer. It does not rely on files and leaves no footprint. That is why it is very challenging to identify, because you are not able to detect. There is no file wherein you can say, okay, this is the virus or this is the malware. There is no file at all. So how does it work? So think of it let's say this example, like user receives a spam message with a link on the malicious website, the phishing email which we referred to earlier. User clicks on the link. The malicious website loads Flash, which has known vulnerabilities. So Flash is an example. It could be anything. What will that do? It will basically open a Windows PowerShell tool, and that is where the PowerShell commands get executed. Now, when we talk about fileless malware, so like I said, there is no single file. There are only certain set of PowerShell level instructions or PowerShell level codes, which basically directly get executed on your machine. So think of it, there's a PowerShell script. At times there's a script which will, if you think script is not exactly a file in itself, it is just a set of instructions which get executed, and then what will that do is basically it will execute a script from a different command and control server of the attacker. So if you are a user in your laptop, if you go to a website, it will automatically start executing a PowerShell command in your laptop, and that command will basically reach out to the attackers control command and control server and get additional instructions and additional I would say files which can then impact your laptop. One of the example for fileless malwares is Astaroth. Astaroth is basically a campaign, where there was a massive spam operation wherein thousands and lakhs of users were receiving emails, and in that email there was a .lnk file, right, which is basically a shortcut file. Now, if you think, what can a shortcut file do, right? So that shortcut file will basically get executed and download a file or a different Trojan from the attacker's side. So the actual malware, the LNK file will actually get deleted once it's downloaded the Trojan. So your initial file or initial malware, there is no file for it to actually trace back. So that is why these are very challenging in terms of the if you have to identify or if you have to mitigate. These are the very very challenging malware which we are facing nowadays. There are techniques now evolving to identify or stop these type of malwares, but like I said, even with the techniques, even the malwares are evolving nowadays. So more and more in future, this is going to get real complex and real challenging. uh, Spyware, like I covered, it will just capture your activities. Adwares will just push ads into your machines. It could be in your browser, it could be in your desktops. The idea behind this is to the attackers will basically earn from the advertisements, and then you are basically forced to view such advertisements. Trojans, like I said, they'll disguise themselves as something, but in reality it will be something else. Other malwares which we covered earlier, like there are worms, rootkits, keylogger, botnet, mobile malwares, and different type of malwares which you, as an industry, I would say, if you are cybersecurity, uh, if you are planning to come into cybersecurity, they should be at least at minimum be aware of these type of attacks. There's a concept of malware analysis. So how do you identify what a malware is going to do, right? Do a time check. Okay. So what is how do you analyze that malware, right? So basically, at the end of the day, all of these malwares are nothing but code basically written to perform certain actions. So once you try to identify that code, you can actually understand what that particular malware is supposed to do. And like I mentioned, there is a concept called IOCs, indicators of compromise. So if a malware is performing a particular action, and that is actually triggering certain alerts or certain logs in your machine, then those are your indicators of compromise. That will be something which will give you a red flag that was something is wrong, something is happening. So through IOCs or through actually analyzing the code, you can understand what is a malware supposed to do. And there are different types of malware analysis. Static analysis, just to try to open the code, study the code, uh, then you can understand what is that malware supposed to do. Then there is something called as dynamic analysis. So at times you cannot really see the code, or at times you cannot really understand what is written or what is the malware supposed to do. That is where the dynamic analysis come to the picture, wherein what you'll do, you'll put that particular malware in a sandboxed environment. uh, what is a sandbox environment? So think of it like a separate environment which is basically locked from outside, and you are just putting a code inside that sandbox environment and locking it again. And what you'll do, you'll just observe what that particular code is doing in that environment. That is called a sandbox environment. And dynamic malware analysis is where you put in a code, you watch it get executed, you just sit back, you see what all that malware is trying to do, and then you understand, okay, what was that malware supposed to do. And then there is a concept of hybrid analysis, right, wherein you use static and dynamic depending upon the different type of malware, and accordingly you can do the analysis. Like I said, static malware will just, you have to look for signs, or you have to study the code or see what is it doing. Dynamic analysis, you have to understand what the malware is doing after the execution, what is it supposed to do. In terms of the tools and studies, there are certain tools which are used, which you can use. PAID, file analyzer. I'm sure you are viewing this for the first time, but if you have to actually perform an analysis, at minimum, these are the tools which you should be aware of. Let me give you some case studies now. So basically, I have two case studies which I can actually discuss with you guys. So there was a case which I had supported, for the local law enforcement police department, and so that was a case wherein I had to use phishing as a technique to actually catch the criminal. Uh, so what was happening is that there was a criminal who had basically managed to get a WhatsApp access of a female, and that female was basically being harassed by the criminal every time. They were sending threatening messages, emails to her every day using different mobile numbers, and these mobile numbers were international numbers. So as a police department, they were not able to track it or trace it. So how do we capture that such type of criminals? So this is where with their uh, assistance, I was able to set up a phishing website, and we basically laid out a plan, because that criminal was still sending messages to the that particular female. So what we did was we set up a phishing website. We used some social engineering technique to trick that criminal to click on that particular link, right? So what happened was that he was sending that girl some threatening messages, and immediately after setting up the phishing website, she replied to him saying that the police have all information about you. They found out all the information from this URL, and that URL was nothing but dummy URL which we had set up, right? And when that attacker actually clicked on that link, we were able to capture his details, like his IP address, his device information, everything. And basis that information, with the help of the law enforcement, we actually tracked that criminal down, and we actually managed to capture him, or solve that particular case, right? So when we talk about cybersecurity techniques like phishing, right, they can not only be used by the attackers or the malicious users. We can use that techniques to actually help the law enforcement. That's what I've been doing, to actually use the similar psychology or a reverse psychology concept and actually fish the attackers itself. That was one case which I can share. Second is investigation of a ransomware attack. So there was one organization which was impacted by ransomware. uh, it was a big financial company, and they were basically, they had around 200 servers which were impacted by ransomware, and all they were locked. So we were called in for the investigation of that attack. So what happened in a ransomware is that you are locked out of your system, right? But as a mitigating control, what you can do is you can anyways format that machine and restore the backup you might have, right? And if, when we talk about companies, every companies takes backup as a process very seriously. So they have pretty much backup of 1 day before, like T-1, right? Backup is already there with the organization. Every day they take a backup. So that organization successfully managed to back up their data and get rid of the ransomware from their machines. But they called us for an investigation to identify how that ransomware was actually came into their network, because they had every possible security control in place. They had antivirus, they had threat monitoring solution, they had security operations center, everything. They had firewall, IPS, but still they were impacted by ransomware. So we were called in for investigation. We tried to investigate. I think it took around 7 days for us to actually investigate through 200 server logs and everything. And then eventually we were able to find out that there was a Windows 2007 machine, right? So most of you are aware Windows 2007 is basically out of support now. You won't get updates on a Windows 2007 machine. So if there are any vulnerabilities which are there in 2007 machine, they will be there as it is. Microsoft is not going to give you patches for that. So that organization had one Windows 2007 machine, and which had one vulnerabilities which was actually used to perform that ransomware attack. And again, how did that malware came into the environment? It was through a phishing email itself. So through a simple phishing email, the attacker sent a malware which was specifically designed to exploit a Windows 2007 vulnerability, and then basis that vulnerability, they managed to get into the network, and then through which they downloaded the ransomware and spread that ransomware inside the company network. So these are some sample case studies, which will help you understand what is happening in real world apart from the theoretical concepts which you just understood. So that was, I would say, all from the cybersecurity perspective. You understood from an organization standpoint how the organizations look at cybersecurity. You understood that when we hear different types of attack, what are those attacks? They are nothing but they are malwares which are sent across through different mediums, different channels to basically get their have the intention, execute the intention of the attacker. Now these are some few pointers I would say, because you guys are still in college, you are still studying. You might have some of you might have aspirations to actually have a career in cybersecurity. So I have one slide to help you decide a career, right? So if you are willing to enter into cybersecurity as a career, then you have to consider all aspects, right? When I say all aspects, then what I mean is that cybersecurity is a domain, which is, I would say, which basically falls under the umbrella of a bigger domain, something called as information security. So information security is, not limited to cyber, right? Information can be in any form. You can have files, actual physical files which contain the information, and you can have a digital files wherein your cybersecurity comes into the picture. But information security as a whole is a much bigger domain. If you are considering a career, you should also look at information security, because cyber as a digital, is a digital, I would say, digital background or a digital baseline, career, right? So you need to understand how technologies are working in cybersecurity. But if you feel you are strong in logic, right? If you think you can break down logic and you can understand security as a whole, then you should also look at information security as a career. And if you are willing to deep dive into cybersecurity, there are few certifications you should look at. If you are very keen or interested, like we have CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, we have CISA, CSAM, CSSP. So CISA is Certified Information Security Auditor, because information security, if a career in information security is nothing but information security auditing, right? And that is a very, very huge, market going forward. Best way to identify, career channel is to just copy the name of the certification and go and put it in any website, which job website like monster.com, naukri.com. Go anywhere, put any of the certifications in the search box, and you'll see that how many jobs are there available today for those type of certifications. If you are interested in digital forensics, then there are certain cases, certain certifications you can look at. There is a diploma for digital forensics. Then there are certain software specific certification like NCASE, FTK. NCASE and FTK are two main softwares which are used in digital forensics. So if you have to become a forensic expert, you should actually try getting certified in these tools. That will open the gateway for you for different jobs into digital forensics. Job profiles at industry. So nowadays, what are the profiles which companies are looking at, right? If they have to give you a job, you won't find a job which will say a cybersecurity tester. It has to be broken down. What in cybersecurity? Because cybersecurity as a domain is, like I mentioned very earlier, it is a huge domain. It's not one thing can cover all. So in the today's world, there are different profiles which organizations are looking at, like application testing, vulnerability assessment or penetration testing, security testing at as a whole, which would include your physical testing as well. Then you have network, then you have infrastructure, then you have SOC, levels 1, 2, 3, then you have risk and compliance and security analysis. So these are some sample job profiles which the organizations are looking at, right? So why I'm telling you all of this? Because if you have to consider a career, or if you're looking for a career, these would be the job openings where you will be eventually applying for. So whatever I explained in the earlier sessions, like everything from the governance up to the tactical to the operations, is what is actually split across these profiles, and is what is actually being done today in every organization. If you are looking for a job, these would be the profiles which you would look at. Basis the certification or basis certain information, you can actually apply for these job profiles and get your entry inside the cybersecurity world. Okay, I believe that was a lot of information to process, but yeah, so that's all. And if you have any questions, we can have the Q&A session now.
Yes, Sagar sir, we have two questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
But before we go ahead, I would like to invite our Vice Principal of the campus and HOD of Electronics Telecommunication Department, Dr. Sanjay Deshmukh, sir. Sir, welcome to this. In spite of your busy schedule, you could able to make it for this. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Sanjay Deshmukh, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope you can hear me. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So we have today's speaker, Mr. Sagar Gajara.
Yeah. Sagar Gajara ji.
Yes,
Thank you so much for enlightening our participants on cyber security today. I see around more than 90 participants already are online for this session. So thank you so much on behalf of the Institute. I thank you for your time, the skills that you have shared with us. Thank you, Sagar ji.
sure, sir. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Sagar. So the question is, the first question is how to deal with the data leakage. This is from our Deputy HOD, Dr. Poonam Sonar. Please guide us.
Sure. So when we talk about data leakage, right, that means an attack has successfully happened and that data is actually leaked in public. Now, depending upon the type of data, the company actually decides how to go about it. So if a company has, they have leaked their customer information, then the idea is, for them to actually first to identify how much of the information is leaked, right? Because, if it's leaked, meaning the attackers has already managed to infiltrate their network. They have managed to actually take away the set of data. So the company would actually try to identify till what extent how much data they have actually leaked. That is the first step. Second step is basically to perform an investigation, to identify how they were what was something they exploited. Are they still inside their network? Because as an attacker, you would actually never try to completely quit or completely disconnect if you are able to attack. I would say hack into a network, right? You would try not to completely lose the control. So the organization or the company will try to figure out कि boss अभी भी इन लोग network में है कि नहीं, right? If they are able to still find them out, their idea is to cut them off. These are the first two steps. Now the third step is to what is happen after the data leakage, because more often than not an attacker will if they have to do they're trying to leak the data, they will never release or never leak the data directly. Firstly, they will always try to blackmail that particular company and say ki boss, I have your so much data, give me the money or else I'll leak it. And if the company denies it, then they'll go ahead and they'll leak the data. That is one thing. Second thing is they'll actually try to sell that data in the deep web, right? So there we have deep web, dark web. There are black markets which are available today in the you can access them via Tor, and there you'll find that there are billions and millions of data which are available for sale. That's how the attackers will actually try to sell that data there. Now, from a company standpoint of view, what is it that you can do? To be honest, there isn't really much you can do. You have to just identify how that data leak happened, which was the vulnerability which was exploited to actually get that data. You have to take that learnings. You have to implement new set of controls so that that incident does not happen again. That is something which the company can do. And if that data leakage included customer information, then it is their duty. It is mandatory for that company to actually inform the customers that their data has been leaked. Now that data could be anything like their username, password, or their personal information like the name, address. Anything could be there. Anything related to customer, right? Anything is leaked, then they'll have to inform their customer, because if their username and password has been leaked, then the customer has to immediately go and change their username or change their passwords. And also, if there's something called as two-factor authentication, they can try implementing certain new controls which will reduce the impact. You cannot really take away the impact because the data is already leaked now, right? And as I had mentioned earlier, there is a body in India called as CERT-IN, Computer Emergency Response Team India. So every company is mandatory, if they have suffered a data leak, they have to inform CERT. They have to actually inform CERT what happened, how was the data leaked, what data was leaked, what did they do next, right? And after all of this, it is actually depend upon the company whether they wish to take a legal action, right? If they want to file a police complaint, if they want to try to catch that particular attacker who leaked the data. To be honest, in my experience, 99% of the time, they are never able to catch it. Their attackers are never caught because in our forensic investigations, at the most we can find an IP which was used to perform that particular attack or used to perform the leak the data, and that IP would be from any country outside India, right? Which they would never share the information, and specifically if that IP is, let's say, from countries like Pakistan or China, that is a dead end from an investigation standpoint. So that's how usually a company, or any organization has to deal with data leakage. I hope that answers the
Yes,
question.
yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, we have one more question from Arvind Sangre. So, can you guide something on hashing?
Right. So hashing is basically a control or a technique which is used to protect the integrity of the data, right? So let me give you an example. If I have a document which is stored at a secure place, or let's say let me take an example of a code. I developed an application. I have a source code of that particular application. Now, in order to ensure, if I have to share that source code with you, let's say if I'm going to share that source code with Piyush, I'm going to share that source code with Arvind, but and they are going to share that source code back with me. Now, how do I ensure that if I have something in my code that either Piyush or Arvind are not going to tamper my source code? So what I'm going to do, I'll generate a hash of my code. Hashing is basically a technique which will give me an output. That output could be a value ranging from 16 data bits to 32 data bits to 2048, depending upon the type of encryption or depending upon the type of technology I want to use for hashing. So there are certain well-known technologies like MD5, SHA1. These are different well-known technologies which you can use for hashing, generate the hash. So if my source code, if I generate my hash, if I have my certain set of source code and I then generate a hash value of that source code, right? Now, if I have to share that source code with, let's say, Piyush or Arvind, or if I have to share it with anybody, and when they share it back with me, or if they are accessing the source code from somewhere else, right? How will I ensure that they have not tampered with my source code? Is that after that activity, I will generate the hash and I will try to match that hash value, right? Always remember, hashing is different than encryption. Hashing is a one-way method wherein if I generate the hash from a source code, I cannot generate the source code from a hash. That is not possible. Hashing is just a value which will come basis this data or text or information which is there. So if I generate the hash and after the activity like sharing with somebody or somebody else accessing that information, I will again generate the hash and I will try to match that two hashes. If there is, if a smallest change has happened to the source code, even as small as adding a space bar, then the hash will change. So the initial hash and the hash generated now will not match. That will give you an insight that the integrity has been breached, and that is where you understand that somebody has tampered with your source code. So that is where hashing is actually used.
We have time constraints, sir, but we will take one more question if time permits, sir. Is it fine, sir?
Sure.
Yeah. Is iOS better aspect keeping the privacy to avoid data theft, as they claim basically?
So again, this question is very subjective because iOS again is nothing but an operating system like Android, like Windows, right? When we talk about privacy, Apple has taken few steps, in protecting your privacy, but always remember, no operating system is 100% secure today. There are always, exploits available in the market to actually to actually attack that. So, if you have on a personal level, individual level, if you ask me that is iOS better than Android, I'm going to, uh, I'm not going to answer it in a yes or no, because for me, Android and iOS are same, right? Uh, Android gives you more control in the operating system, whereas iOS, they are basically taking call on your behalf and putting in hard coding in few controls in the iOS application. Android, you have option to actually customize it or define the control at the bit by bit level as well. So there isn't really much difference in both of the application. Certain sets where iOS claims they are better in terms of privacy because they are not allowing the application which are installed in your mobile to actually access some of your personal information. That's all. That is a small control which they have kept. But to be honest, there is that possibility or that option available in Android as well. So it is more of a marketing gimmick, if you ask me. But that is, again, it's a subjective, and in my opinion, I feel that it's a marketing gimmick. And in Android also, you can have that level of controls if you are really into protecting your privacy.
Thank you very much, sir. Over to Arvind Sangre, sir. Arvind, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Sagar, sir, for such a wonderful session. And you explain all the points with good examples, and the examples were really real-time examples that you have explained.
Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Institute, Department of EXTC, Principal Sir, Vice Principal Sir, and everyone present for the session, we would like to express our sincere thanks and gratitude for enlightening us on various topics on the cyber security that you cover in today's session, Sagar sir. The topics such as fundamentals of cyber security, framework-based approach of the cyber security, concept of application security, different types of attacks, common types of malwares, and the excellent case studies that you have discussed with us. You also give us important information regarding the certifications and career options in the cybersecurity and the job profiles in cybersecurity. Thank you very much, sir. So in short span of the time, the huge pool of knowledge is being shared with everyone. And it was very well conducted and presented. Everyone enjoyed the session a lot. The session was also interactive with question answer session, and the knowledge that you have given with the examples, that is really very helpful for everyone. We are grateful to attend the session, and thank you again, sir. Again, I would request all the participants to complete the feedback form and the quiz link that will be posted on the WhatsApp group at 1 p.m. Thank you once again, sir, for such a valuable session and your precious time that you have given us, Sagar sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Over
Thank you
to
for
you,
actually inviting me and giving me the opportunity as well.
Thank you,
with
sir.
with the permission of Sanjay Deshmukh sir and Sagar sir, can I end up the meeting?
Sure. I would like to just conclude it, by actually wishing all the best to all the students in their, upcoming exams, and also for their careers. So all the best, everyone. Hope you are, you find the success you look for.
Thank you. Thank you,
sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Sanjay Deshmukh sir,
Yeah.
can I end up the meeting?
Yes, we can end it. Once again, I thank Sagar sir for your time, sharing your knowledge and skill with the participants. Thank you all participants for joining the session and making it active. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, sir.